First, appeal of decisions from the Historic Zoning Commission. Pursuant to the provisions of 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County via statutory writ of certiorari. You're advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. I guess you all had a chance to review your minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. The first thing on our thing for today is the design guidelines for SALEMTOWN neighborhood conservation.
The Commission is being asked to approve the design guidelines for the impending SALEMTOWN neighborhood conservation zoning overlay. Councilmember Eric Gilmore is requesting a neighborhood conservation zoning overlay for the SALEMTOWN neighborhood, which includes 4th and 5th Avenues North between I-65 North and Garfield Street and portions of Garfield, Buchanan, and Coffee Streets. Staff recommends adoption of the SALEMTOWN design guidelines, finding that they meet the state and local standards. The applicable ordinance for the design guidelines is Article 9, Historic Zoning Commission, 17.40.410, Powers and Duties, Establishment of Design Review Guidelines. The Historic Zoning Commission shall adopt design guidelines for each historic zoning overlay and apply those guidelines when considering preservation permit applications. Design guidelines relating to the construction, alteration, addition, and repair to, and the relocation and demolition of structures and other improvements shall be consistent with the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 as amended. A public hearing following the applicable public notice requirements of Article 15 of this chapter shall precede the adoption of all design review guidelines by the Historic Zoning Commission. Testimony and evidence material to the type of historic overlay under consideration may be considered by the Commission in its deliberations. Now for a little background on the district. The Metro Historic Zoning Commission heard this case on February 20th, 2013, and recommended adoption of the overlay to the Metro Council. But due to ongoing neighborhood discussions, the MHCC delayed adoption of the design guidelines until today's public hearing. A draft of the design guidelines has been available on the MHCC website for approximately 3 months. Notice of the April meeting or today's meeting also provided the direct link to the design guidelines and information on how someone could obtain a printed copy. A couple of changes have been made since the first draft design guidelines was posted. The boundaries of the district have changed to what has been reviewed by the Metro Council, and the language concerning appropriate height for infill construction has changed based on neighborhood comments. The SALEMTOWN design guidelines were written following the general format of previous neighborhood conservation design guidelines and based on the National Park Service Secretary of Interior standards. The guidelines also include the Secretary of Interior standards. An architectural resource survey was conducted, and the guidelines were customized to address the specific architectural characteristics of the neighborhood. And just here's a little bit of information on the general architectural styles and form of SALEMTOWN. SALEMTOWN's architectural styles are simple, with several common house forms evident. One prominent form is a shotgun house, which is a long, narrow, one-story building derived from Yoruba housing type via Haiti and later from Louisiana. It was most popular in urban areas after the Civil War. Examples in SALEMTOWN have either a front porch, a long side porch with the entrance towards the back of the porch, or a recessed entrance. Other common forms found in the district are gabled L's, which have an L-shaped footprint in simple side gabled buildings, which typically have a shed roof full porch, a centered gabled partial width porch, no porch, or a recessed entrance. Hipped roof bungalows are also seen throughout the district and typically have a full width porch or a cutaway porch within the main body of the building. All of these forms are seen within a variety of styles, mainly Italianate, Queen Anne, Colonial Revival, and Craftsman styles. Duplexes in the neighborhood are typically side by side with 2 front entrances and 1 or 2 front porches. With one exception, all historic dwellings are 1 or 1.5 stories tall. So in conclusion, staff recommends adoption of the SALEMTOWN design guidelines, finding that they meet the state and local standards.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to staff? Open public hearing. Any people like to speak about this, the adoption of the guidelines? Just come forward and say your name and address. Okay, apparently there are none, so I'm going to close public hearing.
I'll move to adopt the guidelines for SALEMTOwn neighborhood conservation zoning overlay.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. SALEMTOwn neighborhood conservation zoning design guidelines. All right. So the next is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda.
We have a few items that were listed on the consent agenda that will be pulled. 105 Lindsley Park Drive will be heard with the regular business, and there was another 2926 Westmoreland posted on the consent agenda. We never received sufficient information that we were requested, so that's an incomplete application and may return at a subsequent meeting. The remaining cases, 700 Monroe Street is an application for signage in the Germantown district. 3723 Central Avenue is an application for demolishing an existing accessory building and building a new accessory building with a reduced setback. 915 Fatherland Street, an application for new construction. In addition, we're reviewing under the new construction guidelines. 2616 Belmont Boulevard is an application for an addition in the Belmont Hillsborough district, and 1410 Gale Lane is an application for new construction of an outbuilding with reduced setback. That's the one I said was removed. And 1222 7th Avenue North is an application for the construction of an addition, a rear addition in the Germantown district. With those two that I said having been removed, staff finds the remainder of the consent agenda to meet the applicable design guidelines for the cases and recommends approval of the consent agenda.
Okay. Any questions to staff about that? Okay, thank you. First on public hearing, make sure with all the ones that were included, were there any people in the audience that would like any of these to be heard that were not the two that were already indicated, 105 Lindsley and 2926 Westmoreland, which is not on there anyway. Okay.
Move to adopt the consent agenda with the two exceptions.
Okay. Do I have a second? Yes. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. So the first one we will hear will be 105 Lindsley Park Drive.
Yeah, if that's all right, we go ahead and put that at the beginning of this agenda, regular business. You may recall 105 Lindsley Park Drive. This came to you 2 months ago. I'll refresh your memory. It's a one-story house with typical craftsman-style features, including 3/1 windows, bracketed eaves, and exposed rafter tails. It was constructed circa 1930. The building, as you see it there, is approximately 842 square feet in area. The upper story, at one time it had an upper story, but that doesn't meet code for habitable space because the ceiling height is too low. And 2 months ago, you heard an application to demolish the house, or actually just before you heard the case, it was deferred at request of the applicant. And since that time, staff and the applicant have been meeting and having several discussions to try to find a scenario that would allow the house to be retained and enlarged, which is the current application. It would be to enlarge the building with a side and rear addition. The side addition will be 1 story tall, and the rear addition will be 2 stories tall. There's shaded areas there. The addition will start at about the midpoint of the house on the left side, from the front at the midpoint, and the rear addition will set in from the right side of the house by 2 feet. In general, as you know, it's not really appropriate to enlarge a house with an addition that is both taller and wider, and it's generally discouraged in most situations. However, with this property, there are several unusual conditions that would make a typical addition impossible. One of those being that the rear yard of the house is only 25 feet from the rear of the structure. The rear property line is only 25 feet from the rear of the structure. With a required setback already at 20 feet, they've requested a rear setback reduction of 10 feet to accommodate an addition, but even with that, there's a very shallow rear yard. In fact, you'll see the adjacent property below to the south has a rear yard that's 48 feet deeper, and subsequent houses going down the block have even more of a rear yard. In addition to that truncated rear yard, you'll see that the house form is that of a front gabled bungalow. If it were a side gabled bungalow, a ridge raise addition could be possible, but with a front to back ridge, there's no room to accommodate that type of addition. Also, as I said, the ceiling height is too low on the interior of the upper story, so there wouldn't be any benefit to adding side dormers, even though they would meet the design guidelines. So in those ways, the options for enlarging the house are severely limited. So given the unique circumstances of the property, staff felt that the side and rear location of the proposed additions are appropriate. The one-story portion, the one-story addition, will begin, as I said, behind the midpoint of the building, 21 feet back from the front wall of the house. The addition will project 12.5 feet to the left, which increases the width of the house, or which is 50% of the width of the house. And the eave height of the addition will match the eave height of the existing house, with a shed roof tying in below the ridge of the existing primary ridge. This roof is partially obscured by the side gable of the existing front porch and will not impact the primary ridge. As I said, it sits below. The foundation height matches that of the house. Considering, again, the unique conditions, staff found that this was an appropriate addition and would meet the guidelines 2B1 and 2B2. The rear addition portion will set in from the right side of the existing house, as I said, by 2 feet on the right side and extend across the left to align with the wall on the side addition. The roof of the addition would be a side-facing gable, 4.5 feet, 4 feet 5 inches taller than that of the existing roof. This peak of this roof will be 42 feet back from the front of the house. This addition, the eave of the addition would be 5 feet 6 inches above that of the existing eaves, and the foundation also would match that of the existing house. Again, staff found that because of the very unique, or the constraints on this lot that are unique, that this location and type of addition was appropriate, but would recommend that the eave height be brought down 18 inches in order to reduce the amount of wall space that's visible from the right-of-way. As you can see there, the right-of-way is approximately 10 feet below the grade of the front of the house, so reducing that eave would reduce the visible wall space. Again, it's not a configuration that is typically appropriate in most situations, but because the primary roof doesn't accommodate a ridge raise and the ceiling height is too low to benefit dormers, and the constraints on the depth of the lot not allowing a rear addition or a longer rear addition, staff found the proposed addition to be appropriate. Other sections of the guidelines, I've gone into more detail in your packets, but for the materials, the roof material and color, window pattern, appurtenances, those generally meet the design guidelines, or the sections of those design guidelines, with some additional materials that are not known being approved by staff. Our conclusion is that staff recommends approval of the proposed side and rear additions with a reduced rear setback with the following conditions. Those being that the second-story eave height be lowered to 18 inches, that the windows have 4-inch casings, and that corner boards be added unless the corners are mitered, but I believe they'll not, so there'll be corner boards. Unknown materials, window, foundation material, roof color, that those can be approved by staff, and that any additional appurtenance is not indicated on the site plan, should they be added, they can be approved by staff as well. And sort of summing up, there's 4 conditions: that material information and proportions be shown on any revised drawings prior to issuing a permit. Because of the unique characteristics of the house and the lot, which doesn't accommodate a more typical addition, staff finds the proposal meets the design guidelines for new construction and additions in the Lockland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. I believe the applicant is here. I'm sure you'll have questions. And did you all receive the email that was submitted from a neighbor in opposition to this project? If not, I have printed copies here we can pass around.
Okay. Could you pass around the copies?
Sure. It's just one email, but multiple pages. I'll put one on each side.
You've read it. Okay, any questions to staff?
Sean, I may have missed it. Tell me about the height of surrounding historic buildings from this property.
They're taller than the house. I'm not sure. Well, yeah, you can see actually in the upper right picture there, which is a historic photo or from the 1960s. That's more typical of houses nearby. They're side gabled bungalows. The 105 Lindsley Park is the only front gabled bungalow, I believe. So the others are side gabled, a couple feet taller. I'm not sure of the exact heights of the adjacent houses, but they're, you can tell just from looking at the street, they're a little taller.
How would the second-story addition height compare to that neighbor house there?
It would be pretty comparable in height to the house next door. The new ridge of the new roof would be further back from the street.
Any more questions to staff?
The rendering that we have here is probably a dumb question, but I'm not familiar with these forms. The rendering that we have, it doesn't include the 18-foot drop in the eave. Is that correct?
The 18-inch, no. These are
18-inch.
In fact, that was a condition that we were recommending in our staff recommendation, but I think the applicant will probably elaborate, but that's not something that they think they're able to do.
Okay.
So they've not made that revision.
All right. So we don't have that here.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Sean, on the proposed south elevation in our package, there appears on the second story to be what may be a bump out or a projection that I'm not sure I'm seeing in the plan.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I brought that up to the architect also. It's in error. The entire wall there will have to set in 2 feet. It looks like maybe an earlier version where they were setting part in further than the other.
Okay, so the plan is accurate with just the straight wall there.
Yes.
Set in 2 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
So the garage gets demolished?
Correct. It's a well, they haven't applied to do it that I am aware of, but it would be a non-contributing structure, so that would not be an issue, and that can be approved by staff.
Last month we saw a house very similar to this, right, that was approved for demolition. Is that right?
That's correct. That one, they submitted more evidence to demonstrate the case had been made for economic hardship. I believe that I haven't seen the structural report for this house, and I'm not sure how it compares as far as conditions, foundation. I guess you can draw your own conclusions from the photograph of the front yard, somewhat.
All right, thanks, Sean. Would the applicant or owner would like to come forward, please state your name and address.
Name's Jim Ritchie, 4124 Aberdeen Road. If you recall, I was here a couple months ago. We were wanting to demo the house. After talking to Sean, the Historical Commission, and trying to work with the neighbors, there was two items that were really of concern in regards to the neighbors, and that's, of course, the size of the home and the front elevation, keeping it aesthetically pleasing to meet the historical portion of it. The current house right now is a one bedroom at best. We needed to get additional square footage for living purposes and as far as value of the home with the surrounding houses. So we tried to work with them. The neighbors, they said they'd work with us, so we kind of met them halfway. We increased the additional square footage and kept the front elevation, and going to bring it up to the right photo over on the right. But in regards to the 18 inches, why that's not possible is it actually reduces the head height. As it is right now, we're going to do a vaulted ceiling on that second story. By bringing that down 18 inches, it would almost make it head height there wouldn't be enough to have the head height there for a second story. So, requesting your approval for that. We worked with Sean, like I said, for the last three and a half months, trying to find something that would meet everybody's approval. This is what we've come up with.
One question about the 18 inches. So that, you said it was vaulted, so when you lowered the vault 18 inches, it was going to be, or is it?
Won't be enough head height.
So what is to the ridge of the vault, the interior? Do you know what I mean? From the finished floor to the.
We're going to be a little bit over 8 feet, I believe.
So
on the sides, it's going to be 5, 6.
It's
right.
going to be really small at the sides.
Right.
Yeah. Any more questions to the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Open public hearing. Anyone like to speak for or against the project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion?
I guess my concern here is that we've got the side addition, and then the roof of the addition in the back is greater than the 4 feet that we typically allow, and it starts earlier than 40 feet from the front of the house. So there's a number of different things that we don't typically allow. And if we do allow it, it seems like we maybe allow one, but not 2 or 3. But then there's the reasoning that it's an unusually shaped lot, and I guess the question that I'm sort of struggling with is the unusual lot reason enough, or is that something that is apparent when you buy the house so you know? And is this a house that just isn't supposed to be 2,200 square feet, or should we strive to allow people to make 2,200 square foot houses because that's what people want and they want to live in the city and they need room? So that's sort of what I'm struggling with, and I don't know that I know the answer, but I am a little bit hesitant to set a precedent that almost any house, regardless of circumstances can be turned into a 2,200 square foot house regardless of our guidelines, and that's kind of what I see here, and that is kind of a scary precedent because there are a lot of small houses.
How many houses in this area are similar to this that this might be setting a precedence for?
I'm not sure. I would think it's a very low number. This house form with the front gable, primary ridge with that little side porch, I know there are others of that. I think there's one on the 1300 block of Fatherland, and there's, I think, one on Holly somewhere. It's not it's a historic form that you'd see in like an old Sears catalog or something like that. There just aren't very many of them.
Sean, would you say that, I think you may have already said this, but generally the scale of this house is maybe slightly smaller than the typical home in the neighborhood or the average home in the neighborhood?
It certainly seems to be, especially since the upper story is not usable space. The other houses on Lindsley Park Drive, and there are only 4 or 5, I think, on the north or the east side of the street, are similar in size, but those are actually, several of them have already been added onto. So historic portion of this house is pretty small, relatively.
And just to follow up on that, so after the addition, how is it comparable size? And I know you didn't do a specific record, but just based on that same information you just said about observation.
I'm sorry, I don't think I don't have the answer to that handy.
I understand.
Can you go over the 18-inch issue again, please?
I guess that follows along with what Commissioner Kahlberg had mentioned, how normally we've sort of set up the precedent that's been established is that taller additions are appropriate under certain circumstances, and that it's usually when the addition is this far back, roughly for starting 40 feet or so back, and then for every 10 feet that it's back, then you can go up a foot. So 40 feet back from the front, you can go up 4 feet. It's not set in stone necessarily. It's just sort of the development of best practices and what we've seen and found to meet the design guidelines. And here with the wall space between the existing eave and the new eave, obviously in elevation it looks like it's all on the same dimension, but it's much further back. But we just thought that would be more consistent with what's been approved before, although there's not much of this addition that I guess is otherwise consistent with what's been approved before.
Is dropping it 18 inches, does that hit the 4-foot dimension, or?
It would actually, I think, exceed that a little bit.
Is that the 40 feet from the short side of the property or the long side of the property?
From the front wall of the house.
The front wall of the house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although, I mean, obviously, what's visible behind 40 feet from the front of a side gabled house is different than what's visible from 40 feet behind a front gabled house.
Sean, could you repeat again the dimensions from the front of the facade to the 1-story addition, and then also from the front of the facade to the 2-story addition?
Yes. So the
maybe
let's down those sections. The 1-story addition will begin 20 feet back from the front wall of the house, and the addition will be 12 feet 6 inches projecting to the left. Actually, maybe, oops, go the wrong way. There. And the 2-story addition will set in 2 feet from the right side of the house. As I said, it'll be 4 feet 5 inches taller.
But the two-story addition sits further back than the one-story addition.
Yes, in fact, the two-story addition sits entirely, well, it sits behind the mass of the historic footprint. Obviously, a little bit of it kind of the main mass of the two-story addition sits behind the original mass of the house. A very tiny portion of it, like the eaves, kind of sit over the very rear 4 or 5 feet of the original house. The side addition obviously is impacting the form of the original house a little bit more.
So the distance of the two-story addition from the front of the house, you may not have that specific information, but it appears to be over 30 feet.
I have the peak of the roof being 42 feet behind the front of the house.
So 42. It's probably a 12-foot bedroom or so. So half that, 6. So maybe 36 feet, 35 feet or so.
To the eave, yeah.
No, I'm talking about to the two-story addition, the wall.
The beginning.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in the 34 to 36 foot range. I'm guessing. I don't know.
I didn't bring a scale.
Which is not too far off from the 40-foot dimension. The other thing I would point out is on this house sits unusually far back from the street relative to its neighbors and to most of the houses in the neighborhood. We might not be here today if that house was originally built consistent with the rest of the neighborhood in terms of its relationship to the street. And so the effective distance from the streetscape, which is what I tend to be, and I think the guidelines speak to the view from the public right-of-way often, the effective distance of the two-story addition is probably further than a typical 40-foot an addition that's that would be 40 foot off of a typical house, given the setback. So I tend to feel like they've done everything they can. I think we've seen 4,500 square foot homes in other neighborhoods. I'm not sure 2,200 square feet is getting carried away for this neighborhood. It is quite an addition to this house, but for the neighborhood, the scale seems compatible, and given the constraints of the rear setback, I think it's pretty reasonable. What I'm not sure I'm decided yet on is the 18-inch, lowering the 18-inch eave. Would that effectively lower the entire roof, or could they keep the peak at the same place and just lower the eaves and make the roof a little steeper?
We kind of were leaving that with the architect. We'd talked about, it's really the leading edge of the eave, the front eave, so it's not so much I guess you can't really extend it or widen it, bringing the eave down without making the whole house or the addition taller. Maybe it could just be turning it a little bit like a salt box or something like that, where it's just the one eave that changes. But as I understand that, the front section of the two-story addition is where the stairs are. So it's not so much the ceiling at the vault, it's the headroom right at where the eave would be.
In the floor plan, that's where the steps are. So it'd be the landing of the stair, which is the challenge from.
Yeah, based on what the applicant said, it would be lowering that would be basically out of code, I guess, actually.
Probably.
I think if we do allow that in our motion, we identify why it's unique, so that we have something to fall back on, so that we're not setting that precedent. And I think your logic along the lines of where it sits on the lot and all of that, I think we work that into our motion, and that would be more acceptable.
Right.
I guess to acknowledge as well that the applicant, from last month, was asking for demolitions, so it seems like a good step forward that this new plan would be to, keep it and extend it. So just acknowledge that.
All right, any more discussion?
Yeah, I'm with Hunter. I'm not really sure what to do with the 18 inches, but I mean, I concur with everything that he said.
Yeah, I've got to think a little bit about the justification, I guess. I mean, the interior floor plan, I don't know if we use that or not as justification, but I tend to think they've kind of made this as small as, I mean, it could be a smaller addition, I guess, but in terms of the scale, the massing, the height, they've really limited it, where I don't believe it's out of scale with the adjacent home.
Doesn't seem to be.
And given the setback, I would be comfortable, approving it as submitted without the lower 18-inch eave. So I suppose
I wonder if we should see if there's anything that could be reduced, lowered. Maybe the applicant can tell us, or maybe, if it's just a foot or something, or
we could
maybe the angle of the like you said, Brian, could change.
Maybe we can make that part of the motion to still work with staff to get it as lower as possible.
As low as possible. As low as possible with the allowance for these people to be able to stand up straight even as they approach the lower.
Right. So it won't be.
Because it seems kind of crazy to me that.
It probably won't be 18 inches. It might be another number.
That's what I mean. It's got to be a lesser number.
Yeah. Have a motion.
And it may not be any number.
Yeah, it might not.
It may not be any number. It may not be doable.
Yeah, it may not be.
So I think whatever motion is done here, and I'm not going to be the one to do it, you architects can articulate these unique things. But I think there should be an allowance for it to be approved if staff and the applicant cannot, if they decide that it's not a usable space, lowered by any number.
Sure.
I just have a question for staff. We have two things that we're being asked to approve. One is the rear setback. Is that right?
Yes.
And then second is the addition.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that could be done with one motion.
Okay, we get a motion?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. I move we approve the application, or excuse me, let me start over. I move that we approve the reduced setback due to the constraints of the site as the staff has described, and that we approve the plans as drawn with the condition that the applicant work with staff to reduce the eave height on the second story portion of the addition as much as possible.
Can I make one comment and suggest amendment, maybe not to that, but in terms of reducing the height, one thought was maybe you do away with the second floor altogether and we give them the discretion to go back on the first floor with a setback as far as 5 feet, because it is the side setback of the lot next to it. There is some more room back there where you could probably pick up about 300 square feet, and you're getting close to 1,900 square feet just as a first floor house, maybe even 2,000, just as an option if reducing the height creates so many problems with the eaves. Just a thought. Maybe that creates more confusion.
I'm not opposed to that. I guess the question would be for staff. Would staff feel like a one-story addition closer to the front of the house would be less impactful than the two-story addition as proposed?
So this is bringing the addition closer to the front of the house and also extending further to the rear. So just
I think
Just to the rear, wasn't it?
Really just to the rear, but
the rear setback.
the rear setback, because it's the side setback of this other house here, so.
Can we increase the variance from what's proposed without?
It kind of creates a, you could do it in the motion the way you're proposing. It does make it a little bit more complex because that's not what's before you. You have an application of what the applicant would like to do before you. It makes it clearer if you up or down on the one that's before you with limited conditions. That's just kind of easier to follow. If he wants to come back after this is either approved or disapproved with another plan that may take into consideration some of the comments that have been made by the commissioners, that those being articulated by Commissioner Kelberg, maybe being included in that's his option. He doesn't, it's my understanding, I don't think he pays a fee to have it reviewed for the commission. So he could take, of course, those things into consideration. It's not that it couldn't be done, it could be done, it just kind of complicates it a little bit.
It can't be done here now because it is a variance change.
Well, it's really a question I have. Okay.
Can it be done now?
Yes, it can be. And the reason it can be is because you all don't really have variance, if you will, authority in the way that the BZA does. Mm-hmm. You can set the setbacks. You can set the height requirement. And so it's not the kind of variance where you would have to prove like a hardship or something like that in order to get it. Your standard is just, is it appropriate? So you could do it.
Yeah, I think, I guess what I'm hearing is, as we have discussed in some of the issues, and don't want to get into trying to tell the owner and architect
how to write the plan,
how to do it, but what our concerns are, I think the cleaner way to do it would be to take those suggestions and maybe ask that they wanted to defer and come back, and working with the staff to incorporate some of our comments. That may be cleaner.
You can do that also.
I mean, that we can't defer it, but they would have to.
Right, they would have to.
It sounds like we...
But if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a motion on the floor with no second right now. Yeah. So we're already into discussion. So we need, the motion either needs to fail or get a second.
It has not been seconded. Is that correct?
Not yet.
Has it even been finished?
Yeah, it was finished.
Okay. But I didn't get the period.
You want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move we approve the requested reduced setback as proposed, and that we approve the addition as proposed with the condition that the applicant work with staff to reduce the front eave height of the two-story portion of the addition if possible. Period.
Period.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Sorry.
I'll second.
Are we going to, what about the other conditions of staff? None of those? There's a five.
Yeah, thank you. It's been seconded. Can I amend my own motion? And I'll amend the motion then to include staff's recommended conditions with the exception of number 1, given the condition I already put on the motion. Is there a second? Period.
I have a question. Does that give staff enough information to work?
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And we need a second on the amendment.
Oh, yeah, I thought you...
Second.
Yeah, we got a second on the amendment. Okay.
I do have a couple of comments on my own motion, but one is just so everyone's aware, I mean, the motion clearly basically says that we're approving it as is. And I suspect the applicants have already lowered it as much as possible in terms of the head height to reduce the scale. They may find another 6 inches or so, perhaps, or a way to reconfigure the stair so that the landing doesn't come right up under the eave, and those would offer an opportunity. But I just want to make it clear that the motion essentially requires staff to approve it as is if they cannot come up with...
Yeah, I was going to reiterate that too, that we're approving as is with that comment, mostly the comment that the staff recommendations and to lower it as much as possible. But we have a motion, we have an amended motion.
And then Brian, sorry, one other comment just I wanted to make about the suggestion earlier, and even though I guess we have the ability to increase a variance or change a variance, I would be concerned, I know that's not on the table right now, but just I wanted to make the point, I would be concerned about decreasing a setback that's being requested or increasing the variance compared to what was advertised and what the public has seen for public hearing.
That's a good point.
And I think too, we need to make sure we stay focused on what we've got, and if it didn't work, then we come up with some ideas, but I don't want to get into the dream house that we can't see. Okay. So we have the motion, we have the amended motion. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion and the amended motion passes. Okay,
I don't know if we mentioned, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say 1313.
Yeah, Shelby has been
withdrawn.
1313 Shelby Avenue has been deferred. The next one is 414 Greenway Avenue.
414 Greenway Avenue is located at the corner of Hillsdale Avenue in the Richland West End Addition Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Currently on the lot is a circa 1932 secondary structure located at the back of the lot where an accessory structure would typically be located. The structure is considered to be contributing and will remain as part of the project. The application is to construct a duplex structure at the front of the lot, which is currently vacant. And just wanted to point out that the existing accessory structure, which is historic, will not be a dwelling unit. It will just be an accessory structure. The new duplex meets all base zoning requirements for setbacks. It faces Greenway Avenue and is shifted slightly to the right of the lot, which is appropriate for a corner lot. The applicant is proposing 2 areas of parking for the duplex. One parking pad is at the rear, off the alley, behind the existing historic structure, which is appropriate. The other parking pad is accessed from Hillsdale Avenue and is located between the duplex and the historic accessory structure. Although the Commission typically discourages access to parking via side street when an alley is available, staff finds this parking pad to be appropriate in this instance because the existing historic accessory structure prevents more parking from being situated off the alley. In addition, moving the parking area closer to the alley but still off of Hillsdale Avenue would mean creating parking in front of the historic structure, which staff does not believe to be appropriate. The duplex will be 1.5 stories tall and approximately 25 feet tall from grade. It will be 43 feet wide and 73 feet deep, which meets the historic context. The front facade contains 2 entrances, one articulated with a pedimented porch, and the other on the left will appear like a window, so you can't really tell, but the leftmost window on the ground floor is actually a door. The primary roof form is a side gable, and the front and rear facades have gabled dormers. The materials for the duplex include smooth-faced cement fiberboard cladding, wood trim, split-face block foundation, brick porch, wood windows, and composite shingle roof. Staff asked to approve all final materials prior to purchase and installation. Here are the side facades. The left side facade has a pedimented entry to one of the duplex units. The duplex's proportion and rhythm of openings meet the historic context. And here's the rear facade. And here are some context photos. The one on the top are directly to the right of the site. The one on the bottom is new construction that was approved prior to the zoning overlay, and that's directly across the street, directly across Greenway Avenue from the site. And here are more examples of structures along Greenway Avenue. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with the conditions that 1, staff review and approve the asphalt shingle color and materials for the front porch floor and steps and the rear porch framing and all windows and doors. 2, the HVAC and all utilities be located at the rear of the duplex or on the side beyond the midpoint of the house. And 3, staff approve all appurtenances not called out on the plans. I'm not sure, is the applicant here? Okay. I think the applicant is here to answer any questions.
Okay. Any more questions to staff? Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Would the applicant like to come forward? State your name and address.
Hi, my name's Randy Robinson. My address is 3317 East Lake Drive, Nashville. We're proposing this construction based on a similar architecture to the neighborhood, and with the the tapered columns and similar roof lines, as well as just the front porch and side porch to match the neighborhood.
Okay. Any questions to the applicant? All right. Thanks, Mr. Robinson.
Okay. Thank you.
Open public hearing. Would anybody like to speak about this project? Okay. Close public hearing. Discussion.
I have one question for staff. The brick baluster on the front porch to me seems a bit unusual with this style of home, and sort of creates less transparency in that sort of semi-private porch space. Is that solely to sort of hide the door and make it look like a window, and is that are there? Well, I guess that's the question.
Sure. The decision to have the brick wall and the door look like a window was the applicant's. It wasn't, as far as I know, direction that the staff had given them. If he had decided to come with two articulated entryways, that would have been fine. This, we also feel, meets the design guidelines. In terms of other examples of porch walls like that, I don't think that there are any on Greenway, but I think there are some in the larger Richland West End neighborhood. So we felt that it met the design guidelines. But in terms of having the door look like the window, that was a design choice from the applicant, which we felt still met the design guidelines.
So this is sort of a bungalow-like home, right? So there's bungalows with low brick walls?
I can't recall any examples off the top of my head, but to us as staff, it didn't seem so unusual, but I can't point to any specific examples. I'm not sure. I don't think any of the pictures would show that. Yeah, you can see the stone. I mean, the one on the top, you can see there's a stone, somewhat of a stone wall. I mean, that's a much smaller porch, but the stone house on the right, it's a much smaller porch and it's probably a smaller wall as well. But
we're okay with the painted brick?
In conservation overlays, we don't regulate painting of brick. We always prefer not be brick not be painted, but it's not something we review.
Okay, do you have a motion?
I move approval based on staff recommendation.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries for 414 Greenway Avenue. The next is 515 ACKLEN Park Drive.
I'm going to be presenting 515 and 517 ACKLEN Park Drive together because they're two contiguous properties and the designs are very similar. But when you vote, you'll need to do two separate motions and approvals. So,
but they have the same issues, basically.
Pretty much, yes. It's the same applicant. Currently, right now, I'll just kind of start in the presentation. There is one historic structure that spans the two lots. I'm sorry, one non-historic, non-contributing structure that spans the two lots. So the application for 515 involves the demolition of the non-contributing structure that you see on the picture. It was on the screen. The existing building was built circa 1956 and is a mid-century ranch house that spans the two lots at 515 and 517. In 2008, the commission approved with conditions a proposal to demolish this mid-century structure and to build a single-family house at 515 and a duplex at number 517. But those permits were never issued because we didn't receive revised drawings. So this application is a new application to, again, consider the demolition and now to consider constructing one duplex at number 515 and one duplex at number 517. That makes sense. So here are the two site plans. And I should just say that staff does recommend approval of the demolition of the structure and feels that the structure does not contribute to the historic character of the neighborhood. So both of the new duplex structures meet all base zoning requirements and are oriented to face ACKLEN Park Drive. Each site will, excuse me, Each site will have 2 parking pads for a total of 4 cars. Sorry, let me just get the water. I'm losing my voice today. The parking pads are located at the rear of the property and are accessed via the alley, which is appropriate. Sorry, I think it's allergies. I'm not sure where this is coming from. The 2 duplex structures are similar in sign, form, scale, and materials. Both structures will be 1.5 stories tall. I apologize. Again, I don't know where this is coming from. And will be about 30 feet tall from grade. Each house has a cross-gabled roof form with front dormers, and each has 2 entryways, one behind a porch and one behind a shallow entryway. Sorry about that. Staff asked that the front porch columns on number 515 have a cap and a base. In addition, staff asked that on both projects, all double and triple window openings have 4 to 6 inch mullions in between them. Here are the side facades. Both houses will be 35 feet wide and 45 feet 6 inches deep. Their proportion and rhythm of openings meet the design guidelines. And here are the 2 respective rear facades, which I believe are identical. The materials for the project include cement fiberboard, hardy shakes, split block, face block foundation, fiberglass shingles, and wood windows. Staff asked to approve all final materials prior to purchase and installation. Here are the perspective drawings of each of the houses. And just to discuss the immediate context, there really isn't any historic context along ACKLEN Park Drive. Pretty much all the structures on ACKLEN Park Drive were constructed either prior to the overlay, which the one on the top is an example of, or are non-contributing structures. I believe it was last July, but last summer, the commission approved the house that's on the top left corner at 522 ACKLEN Park Drive. And then on the other 2 photos, you can see examples of other structures along Hillsdale and ACKLEN Park Drive, which are not historic and don't really contribute to the historic character of the area. So for context, we were looking at the houses along Greenway, which is just behind here, and along Murphy Avenue. I think that's it. So, in conclusion, staff recommends approval of both projects, and we have similar but slightly different recommendations for each of the 2 projects. So, for number 515, staff recommends approval with the following conditions: 1, that the porch columns have a cap and a base; 2, staff review and approve the shingle color, windows, doors, and materials for the front and rear porch columns, steps, and floor. 3, staff approve the material and design of the porch railing if one is installed. 4 to 6 inch mullions be included on all double windows. 5, HVAC and other utilities be located at the rear of the structure or on a side facade beyond the midpoint of the house. And finally, 6, staff review any appurtenances not included on the submitted plans and elevations. And then for number 517, pretty much I won't reread the conditions. It's pretty much the same, except for there are no porch columns, so we are not requiring a cap and a base to the columns that are not there. So happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is there. And again, just to remind you that although these projects are similar, we will need 2 separate motions.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Any questions for Melissa? All right, thanks. Would the applicant like to come forward and say anything?
I'm Preston Quirk, architect for the project, and I'm just pleased as normal to have staff recommendations for both of these. We didn't get staff recommendation on the first go-around on these. It took a little work to get these where they are. So I'm pleased and my client's pleased. So I'm just here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thanks, Preston. Okay, let's start with 515 first. Any discussion? Or a motion?
I move to approve staff recommendations for 515 ACKLEN Park Drive.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, 515 ACKLEN Park Drive is approved. And, okay, 517 ACKLEN Park Drive. Motion or discussion?
I move move to approve 517 ACKLEN Park Drive, adopting staff recommendation.
Okay, have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay, 517 also. Thank you very much. The next one is 1614 Benjamin Street.
The application is for new construction of infill and a new accessory structure at 1614 Benjamin Street. You may remember that this site was before you last month, and the commission approved the demolition of the contributing structure, which you can see here on the screen, based on the grounds of economic hardship. Both the new primary and the accessory structure meet all base zoning requirements for setbacks. The new structure will be located in approximately the same location as the historic structure. Its front setback will be approximately the average of the neighboring houses' setbacks. The house will be located slightly off-center towards the right of the lot. Staff finds this to be appropriate because other historic houses on this block are also located off-center. The accessory structure will be situated in the rear of the property and will be accessed via the alley, which is appropriate. An existing curb cut and parking pad at the front will remain, and a new sidewalk will be installed. The proposed house will be 1.5 stories and will have a ridge height of 27 feet 6 inches above grade. The house's width will be 29 feet and its depth will be 75 feet 2 inches. Staff finds that the house's height and scale meet the historic context. The house will have a side gabled roof form with a shed roof dormer on the front. It has a full width front porch and a recessed entryway. Here are the two side facades. The house will have a 1-story rear extension, which kind of helps to minimize its overall scale. The design's proportion and rhythm of openings meet the design guidelines. There aren't any areas of wall space without large areas of wall space without a door or window opening. And finally, here's the rear facade. The materials for the structure include cement fiberboard, siding, shake siding, split-face concrete block foundation, wood windows, wood porch columns, brick chimney, and architectural shingles. Staff asked to approve all final materials prior to purchase and installation. And here are some images of the proposed garage, which will be approximately 17 feet 1 inches in total height, and it'll be 22 feet by 23 feet 6 inches in terms of its dimensions, which is about 517 square feet. The materials for the accessory structure are similar to those of the house and are appropriate. And we find that the accessory structure's location, setback, height, scale, orientation, and proportion of rhythm of openings are subordinate to the primary structure and fit within the neighborhood context. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the infill and the accessory structure with the conditions that staff approve all final materials, that the utilities be located at the rear of the house or on the side facade beyond the midpoint of the house, and that staff review and approve all appurtenances not included on the plans. I don't know if the applicant is here. The applicant is here.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Any questions? Melissa? Okay. Thanks a lot. Well, would the applicant like to come forward and just state your name and address?
Hey, my name is Scott Smith. I'm here on behalf of Pfeffert Road Architecture for Jamie, and we're pleased to have the approval of staff, and we'll meet all the conditions, and if there's any concerns or questions, I'd be glad to answer any of those. I live at 610 South 14th Street.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for the applicant as he runs away? No, you're good. You're good. All right, open public hearing. Does anyone like to speak about this particular project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion?
I have one concern, and that is the parking pad in front of the house that I understand currently exists, but given that they have alley access and they're building a garage off the alley for parking, and I think on-street parking is allowed on Benjamin as well. We would, I think, typically not allow new curb cuts to be added because it's out of character typically with the neighborhoods. And I guess a question for staff, just to verify, is that out of character with this street and neighborhood?
To have the front parking pads. You see it, I believe a lot of these do have front curb cuts. I'm not sure if you can see in any of the, yeah, you can kind of see there are other front parking pads, and I'm not sure how many of those are parking pads and how many of them go to the rear yard, which is often what we would recommend, is that if a new driveway was being installed, that it would kind of go all the way to the back of the house. But it's my understanding, and Susan can maybe expand on this, but if it's already existing, there's not much we can do about it. We can't require that they remove it if it's already there and existing. But Susan can probably speak to that better.
Typically, your review is going to be limited to just any changes in additions, demolitions, anything that would be a change in the exterior features of the house or the property. It may be, if this is not really a, I don't know if it would get to your issue or not. There could be like a codes question as to, but that would be for them to really enforce as to whether or not that's something that meets code for them to have it. But if it's just the appropriateness of it, at this point, I don't know. Again, unless it was done illegally somehow, and this wouldn't necessarily be the form for enforcing that. It would be for us to work with the department to see if there needed to be an enforcement action in environmental court or something like that. If for some reason they didn't get approval to have that pad and they should have, or something like that, that would be the form.
And question for staff, the examples shown here that do have the parking pads in front, are those on the same side of the street? The opposite side of Benjamin does not have an alley?
Let's see, the one on the top left is the stone house and kind of the blue house on the top left are directly on the other side of 1614 Benjamin, and the one on to the right, top right, is across the street. So yes, I don't, and it looks like, and then the one on the bottom is, I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, that's to the right. So that's also on the same side of the street as 1614 Benjamin. So it seems like where you are seeing the parking pads are on the same side of the street where there is the alley access. I'm not sure why it developed that way, but it seems to be the pattern.
Is there any indication that that was the historic pattern?
No, I don't believe even, I'm not sure if we have the Sanborn map for this area, and Sanborn maps, as far as I'm aware, didn't really even show parking areas and curb cuts and access, so we didn't look into it, so honestly, I don't know if it would have been historically like that or when they would have been installed.
Any more questions? All right. Have a motion?
I move approval based on staff recommendation.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Nice set of drawings, too. Okay, the next one is 506 9th Street. Now I've got your cough.
It's allergy season. Actually, like ACKLEN Park, I'm going to treat 506 and 508 South 9th Street as, I'll present them together, but they also will need separate motions. But they are also the same applicant and similar designs. Currently, 508 South 9th Street is one vacant parcel. The parcel comprises two lots, as had originally been platted as two lots. They were combined by deed, but never formally fully subdivided by plat. So the applicant's proposal includes redividing the lot along grandfathered property line, or lot lines. And the southern portion of the parcel, Lot 3, would keep the address number 508 South 9th, and the northern, not quite half of the lot, would become 506. 508, the 508 lot is only 40 feet wide, along the street frontage, and 506 will be 35 feet wide. The standard lot width in the neighborhood is 50 feet, but as I said, these are grandfathered plats. And the application would be to build a two-story house on each of the new redivided lots. The buildings are similar in scale and character, so as I said, I'll just go ahead and present them at the same time. The surrounding context of this area is fairly diverse in building size and architectural style. There are four squares, craftsmen, there are one-story folk Victorians. But as I said, these two houses will be two-story, and there are several examples of those nearby. Actually, I'll stay there. The new buildings will be sited so that the front setback is in line with two existing Victorian houses that are on existing lots to the south, which are the two lots to the left on this view. This block does not have the uniformity in lot width and building size building width that's found in other areas of the neighborhood. So with the narrower lots, the side setbacks and width of the proposed buildings will actually be correspondingly appropriate. Narrower lots for narrower, or narrow houses for narrower lots, and they do not contrast with those other historic houses in the area. So staff felt the setbacks and orientation meet guideline 3B2A. The new buildings, as I said, would be 2 stories tall. 508, which would be on the left, is a gable L form, 2-story form, with 506 having a hipped roof. The forms are similar to those of other historic houses in the area. There are 2-story hipped houses and 2-story gabled houses, historic houses. So the new houses will be 26 and 28 feet, respectively, going left to right, with an eave height of about 20 feet. That's from grade. The foundation height is about 2 feet at the front. And although the grade drops towards the rear, the grade drops toward the rear, so you see that there actually would be a full story, essentially basement level for each of these new houses, which matches the 2 historic houses that are existing on that block. The roof shape and orientation, as I said, are generally appropriate, compatible with other historic houses. And the attached houses would have basement level garages. In this location, because it's basement level and would be accessed from the alley, they are appropriate. Window rhythm and proportion is generally appropriate along the sides, but staff found that the proportion of windows on the upper story of the front, that there was typically you see windows on the second story are not taller than first-story windows. So each front elevation has a large window that's not an appropriate proportion. But with the condition that the upper-story windows not be taller than those on the first story, staff finds that the rhythm and spacing of the windows would meet the design guidelines. The materials will be split-face concrete block foundation, composite shingle roof, cement fiber siding, and wood shake on the gable fields in 508. Trim, including band boards on both floor levels, porch columns, window casings, that will all be wood. There are window shutters that will be operable, and those are also listed as being wood. There are some other things like the roof color and some other details are not known, and with the condition that staff approves and finds those materials to be compatible, staff finds that the materials generally meet guideline 3B2G. The site plan I don't believe it indicates any paving or HVAC, lighting, fences. Did I say fences? Because it's a historic preservation district, those things do need to be reviewed, whereas they might not in a conservation district. So these items would also need to be approved by staff. The conclusion is our recommendation that the Commission approve the proposed infill construction of 508 and 506 South 9th Street with conditions that the upper story windows not be taller than the first story windows, that the final selection of window, doors, porch railing, if that's needed, and roof color be approved by staff, that the front porch columns have bases and capitals. I believe they're drawn with just bases. And that fences, paving, HVAC, lighting, and other appurtenances be approved by staff.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions? Okay, thanks. Would the applicant like to come back to the board?
Again, my name is Scott Smith. Again, my name is Scott Smith. I live at 610 South 14th. I'm here on behalf of Pfeffert Road Architecture. Glad to have the approval. The one thing that we would like to just sort of set before the board is that center window on the upper story. On both of these schemes, we feel is proportional in terms of solid and void space in the facade, and we think that it's aesthetically pleasing, has some sort of uniqueness in architectural detailing that would benefit the street, and would just kind of like to, I guess, start a discussion on that. Again, can answer any questions or concerns that are here.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? All right, thank you. Open public hearing. Anyone like to speak on behalf of this project? Okay. Close public hearing. Discussion. Any thoughts about the window?
Is the board meeting exceptions on that?
I don't know of any actually, but I can't remember any exceptions where we would allow the bigger window. I can't. Do you know, Sean?
Not that I'm recalling.
Yeah. Go ahead, Hunter.
Just wanted to point out that, and ask the staff, that two houses adjacent appear to be probably late 19th century. Is that right? Some of the older.
That's correct.
Older than most of the homes in the neighborhood, which means generally they would have probably taller windows often, and maybe even lower sills. Is that potentially than maybe a 1920s home in the neighborhood might?
That sounds correct. Yeah, they're fairly high style for the area, for like a one-story Queen Anne cottage, or certainly more high style than your average folk Victorian.
So I sort of agree with both the applicant and the staff, and I guess have maybe a recommended solution, in that I'm not sure the large window seems out of proportion with the building, but maybe the windows on the ground floor seem a bit squatty. And if they were taller, more vertical, more consistent with the adjacent homes, maybe a lower sill, perhaps the larger window on the second story would feel more in proportion.
Or maybe with that, it would actually be the equal.
Yeah, maybe the same size as the.
Yeah. We're just talking about the windows on the front.
Yeah, then perhaps another solution, if they want to keep that larger window on the upper floor, is to increase the height
on the lower floor.
Yeah. I don't know if the staff
should be okay with that.
Feel like that would be.
Sounds like it would have the same effect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Applicant? Might as well while you're here. Okay, good. Okay. Motion?
Is that okay? Yeah,
it's good for it.
But are we talking about just the windows on the front, or all the windows?
just the one.
Just the front, just the facade. Okay.
Lower windows on the front. All windows on the front.
Well, it mostly pertains to the big window in the middle.
The lower
but
the front can get bigger.
Yeah, because it's bigger than the ones on the bottom.
The two on the.
Clearly are bigger than one.
It would be likely lowering the sill slightly and maybe raising the head of the windows to make them more vertically proportioned and the same height as those windows, or as the big window above.
Sounds good.
All right, let's motion.
I'll move we approve staff recommendations.
And I'm sorry, I should say this. We're going to do 506 9th Street first. I'm sorry. Then we'll do 508 9th Street. Sorry about that. So motion for 9th Street.
All right, I move we, wait, which one am I doing? 506. 506. Okay.
I'm sorry, I confused it. 506 South 9th Street.
I'll move that we approve staff's recommendation for 506 South 9th Street with the option to condition number 1 to increase the height of the first floor front facade windows to match that of the large window on the second story.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, 506 South 9th Street. Would you do the same for 508?
I'll move the same motion for 508.
Okay.
South 9th Street.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, 508 South 9th Street is all.
Mr. Chair, something has been brought to my attention, and I just need to confirm if there were. I need to confirm whether or not there was anyone that wanted to speak in opposition to 515 or 517 Lindsay Avenue.
Did I not open?
I'm sorry. Is it ACKLEN Park?
Did I not open public?
ACKLEN Park. Okay. ACKLEN Park. I'm sorry.
Okay.
515 and 517 ACKLEN Park.
Did I go by and not open public hearing for that one?
There's a question as to whether that was opened. So we want to make sure that anybody who wanted to speak in opposition, particularly, if anybody wanted to speak also in favor, they could do so, but particularly in opposition if they were wanting to speak and waiting. I don't think anybody has left the room other than the applicant.
Okay.
We might not be able to do that. I have additional advice if that is the case, but first I need to know if there's anybody here.
I'm sorry if I didn't open public hearing for that, for 515, 517 ACKLEN Park Drive. So let me ask you real quick. So I should just open public hearing?
A show of hands would be fine right now.
Is there a show of hands for 515, 517 ACKLEN Park Drive of any people who want to speak on behalf of it or against it? Okay.
If not, then we're fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for not opening. Okay, so now we're ready for 2010 18th Avenue.
Okay. Sorry about any confusion with 506 and 508. I put 508 on the left because it's on the south side of the streetscape. I tried to recreate the street there. And 6 had the hip and 8 had a gable. So that's how I try to keep those straight. Moving on, 2010 18th Avenue South. The applicant proposes to construct a new single-family dwelling and detached two-car garage on a corner lot at 18th Avenue and Bernard Street. This corner is vacant and has been vacant at least since 1914, according to Sanborn maps, and in all likelihood, it's never had a house there. The house and garage meet the design guidelines in terms of scale, location, setbacks, rhythm of spacing, and roof shape, as elaborated in your packets. Staff does recommend lowering the height of the garage by 1 foot, which the applicant has agreed to do. The majority of materials proposed for the primary building meet the design guidelines. Again, more information is in your packets, but stone, brick, composite shingle for the roof. There may be a discrepancy in the drawings on the roof material, but the primary material would be composition shingle with metal as a secondary roof material for porches and the dormer. More information is, however, still needed on the shutters, the material of the window trim and garage doors, and the color of the roofs. Therefore, staff recommends that be added as a condition. The orientation of the home is appropriate. It matches those of other houses on 18th. And so that meets the guidelines. The garage is oriented towards Bernard Street. However, there is a rear alley. Staff recommends that the vehicular entrances to the garage be oriented towards the alley, as that's what's more commonly found on historic accessory buildings in the district. Also, by either rotating the garage or at least just moving the entrances to face the alley, that would eliminate the need for a 25-foot wide driveway onto Bernard Street. There is a home across the street shown on the right here that has a garage oriented towards Bernard. However, that's a one-car garage, which has obviously a much narrower driveway. So staff recommends as a condition that the garage, as I said, entrances, vehicle doors be oriented towards the alley. And then in doing that, staff would recommend that these dormers, if staff doesn't agree to or doesn't accept that as a condition, staff would still want to see the dormers to sit back from the wall below on the garage by 2 feet. However, if the commission does take that, moving the doors as a condition, staff would want to see that there still be some opening on the Bernard Street side. Windows would certainly be appropriate there. Speaking of windows, the windows are twice as tall as they are wide, generally, which meets the historic context. And typically, commission requires that there be a window rhythm so that there's an opening every roughly 8 to 13 feet between windows. That's consistent or compatible with what's found on historic houses in the overlay. To meet that, staff recommends that an additional window be added on the left side, on the left elevation shown here, the outline in red, approximate location. That may be in the kitchen, so if a true window isn't installed or inserted, a shuttered window or false window may be appropriate. Here's some images of houses in the surrounding context. You can see they're primarily 1.5-story bungalows, craftsmen, many with gabled front porches or dormers. Conclusion, staff recommends approval of the single-family dwelling. Maybe I didn't specify on the setback. It is a narrow lot, so staff is also requesting a setback reduction, but that's been explained in your packets too. Back to the conclusion, staff recommends approval of the single-family dwelling, outbuilding, and setback reduction with conditions that the applicant submits additional information on the windows, doors, trim, and roof color. A shuttered window or window be added to the left side, that the shutters be operational, or at least have hinges and shutter dogs rather than just applied flat shutters. That the outbuilding be oriented so that the vehicle access is to the alley. And then the follow-ups to that is that windows be added so that there's still a rhythm of openings on the street-facing side if the garage is reoriented. That the garage be lowered by 1 foot, as the applicants already agreed, and that utility locations be located behind the house, at least behind the midpoint of the house, but it's a corner lot, so let's just say behind the house. With these conditions, staff finds that the project meets the new construction section of the design guidelines for the Belmont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay.
Thanks, Sean. Any questions to staff?
Sean, what did the applicant have to say to your reorientation request in the garage?
Actually, the applicant's here. Maybe they can answer that. I only know of their response to the one about lowering the height of the garage.
Okay. Any more questions for him?
Yeah. Is there any concern about the amount of surface that the house and the garage take up on the lot? The percentage?
Yes, there's concern, not so much from staff, but we've had conversations with some of the neighbors that are concerned about lot coverage. Well, I think you can kind of see on the site plan if it shows up all right. It's a narrow lot, and there's sort of, one of those no man's land kind of things where between just a grassy area between the street and the actual property line. So the perception of lot space is actually going to be fairly compatible. The actual covered space of the lot is still within the allowable.
All right. Can we go back to the picture that shows this lot, that corner? Okay.
Yeah. Can you see the stake?
Yeah.
Oops. I'll move the mouse if I can get it. There's a northwest corner of the property. And so where the street sign is, and at least 10 or maybe even more, 12 feet of grassy area that's, I suppose, part of the right-of-way, but it's not paved.
I mean, it is, I just don't want us to get us, I mean, this is an area that we have some awfully large homes and some big additions, and lot coverage has been a big question.
Can you tell us what the guidelines are on lot coverage, if that's going to be a pending issue today?
I believe the design guidelines just say that the proportion of built space, actually maybe I should find it to read it. New building mass in relation to open spaces shall be compatible by not contrasting greatly. For a while we were trying to make that be we're incorporating the lot coverage ratio, the floor area ratio, but really there's more to lot coverage, or I should say more to open space than lot coverage alone. It's a 1.5 story building that's pretty narrow, and it's on a corner lot, so there's actually, if you think, include the street as open space, we felt that this met that design guideline.
Let's just say the house next door comes in and wants to build a garage out back.
That application would have to be reviewed on its own merits, I suppose.
Okay, would the applicant like to come forward?
My name is John Brittle, Jr. I live at 5474 Franklin Pike Circle. I'm a broker at Village Real Estate Services, and I represent the applicant. And I'm going to speak before the architect just to make a few comments and thank the staff. This was not the first drawing that we took to the staff, and we've worked with them diligently on this regarding massing and height and width. I would like to make a comment regarding the garage. Thank you for that question. We do have a garage opposite us on the side street where the doors face the side street, and because of the size of this alley and because of your question regarding coverage, we believe that our garage would have to be bigger in the back and move closer to the house in order to get the access that we need unfortunately in today's vehicles to get in off the alley. We believe we can make it work, but it will in fact match this exact setting across the street. So with respect, we would like to disagree with staff's recommendation and ask you to approve it as is. We've also moved the stairwell to that accessory structure into the building in the back on this drawing, and I'd like for us to discuss whether or not an exterior staircase is acceptable in a historic district. And those of us real estate brokers in Nashville appreciate the accessory structure, especially in these college neighborhoods, because we know what it's going to be used for and what it's helpful. And in this situation, if we keep the garage oriented to the side, the entrance, we would like to see the accessory structure staircase on the back toward the alley. And I don't know that the architect has discussed that with the staff, but I would like to know if we get to keep the garage oriented to the side street, I would really like for the stairwell to be outside the garage. If it's not, then the whole idea of accessory structures in these neighborhoods require that the person using the accessory structure go into your garage, or that you have a garage large enough to have a stairwell inside the two bays of the garage. So I'm not sure that you guys have discussed that in the past, but that is one of our questions. And I believe that was my only comment. And our architect is here to answer your questions. Unless you have a question for me.
Any questions?
Can they request us to answer that question about the stairwell at this point in time?
Well, I would say first, let's see if we are even.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let's see what we feel about the switching of the garage, and we'll talk about that when we discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
And let me say this one thing, and I think maybe this is getting to what you're saying. The board doesn't give advisory opinions. So that's the answer to that question. Whether or not it comes up in discussion is something that the board may, make as a condition or something like that, I think goes to what Chairman Tibbs is saying. So,
inside, outside, isn't that has to do with some of the design guidelines in this for this area?
As far as design guidelines, I guess it would be, the phrase in the guidelines is always not contrasting. I don't believe that accessory buildings typically have exterior stairs, and that's the design guidelines. Of course, I detected an implication that the garage might be used as a dwelling or as an apartment, college neighborhood, etc. There are specific requirements in the detached accessory dwelling unit standards that say that exterior staircases are prohibited.
Okay, open public hearing. Anybody like to speak for or against this project? Just come forward and state your name and address.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Jim Schmidt, and my partner Joe Woolley and I own the home at 2006 18th Avenue South, which is 2 doors down from the project at 2010 18th Avenue South. A couple of preliminary comments, if I could, just before we get to our concerns about this infill development. First, I'd point out the notification to neighbors was only a short 7-day window. The sign just went up last week on Wednesday, so there may be others on the street and in the neighborhood who've not had time to review the plans. Second, and overall, I really, while it may be a very nice house in the end, I'm not sure this is the type of infill development that we necessarily want to see in historic Belmont Hillsborough. The design plans submitted do not, in my opinion, reflect the nature and style of the other homes on the street. The narrow width of the house, which according to the plans is 27 feet 6 inches, due to the lot size that you've all been talking about, does not fit the typical width of other homes surrounding us. Some members of the neighborhood association, including my partner, did meet with the architect and talk with him this week, and I think there's been some good discussion there. He has agreed to work with the neighbors and try to include some of the suggested design changes we raised with them to make the project better. We'd ask the commission to consider many of these and recommend that you encourage the developer to continue to work with the staff and the neighbors on these matters. Included in the items we raised with the architect and reflected in many of the staff comments, the current plans include different roofing materials, which I think has been corrected. The garage, we feel, does need to be lowered to a more appropriate height and scaled down. The outside stone and brick materials we think should be natural stone consistent with context and reflect quality products as in the other homes in the area. The outside window issue, which I think has been discussed. I would also ask, since we're 2 doors down, for consideration the upstairs balcony be either eliminated or that in some way designed to keep some privacy maintained. Assuming that the developer continues to work with the neighbors on these design matters, we're willing to support the setback reduction request. Aside from these concerns, and though it may be a little bit out of the realm of consideration for the commission, I'd also raise the fact that the lot currently has 10 well-developed trees on the lot. Our neighborhood has been very high in trying to continue to increase the tree canopy in our neighborhood. And I don't think that cutting down all 10 of those trees, which I think is going to have to be done for this house to be built, is necessarily the best thing. But we'd also request that some consideration be given for the maximum tree and landscaping on the property as possible. And finally, given that the sidewalks on our block currently end at our home, we would also request that they might consider extending the sidewalk all the way down to Bernard. It's my understanding that the developer of the project is also involved with the 2008 property, which was sold as a part of this deal. So it should be able to be, the sidewalk continued. So thank you, and we appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
Jim?
Hi, my name is Kristen Keeley.
Let me ask Jim something first.
Sorry.
Richard wants to beat on me.
You went awfully fast.
Sorry, I thought I only had 2 minutes.
That's all right. Sidewalk, garage height, natural stone, landscaping. Did I miss anything?
I think he's addressed the roofing. There were 2 different types of roofing materials. He's fixed that. And the window header heights, I think there was one of the comments was related to that. Those are the main things. The garage, this is the first we've kind of heard about that may be used as a dwelling for a renter, I'm assuming. That I hadn't really thought about that much. I assume if there's going to be space up there, they might rent it, but that might be something else we'd want to continue to talk about.
Okay.
He also brought up the balcony too.
Yeah, balcony.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name's Kristen Keeley Dinger, and I live at 2011 18th Avenue South. So I'm the property that literally faces this property and was also on the right-hand corner of the presentation that you saw. And I would just echo many of Jim's sentiments. We've had a very quick, as Jim mentioned, we only found out about the meeting last Wednesday, and there were a few other neighbors. One that actually was walking down the street and stopped me this morning. She has 3 young children and wanted to be here today to echo some of the same concerns, but couldn't get childcare in such short notice. So we would love to have a longer period of time to help work with the architect and the developer in revising some of these plans. And I will echo every single thing that Jim said. Some of the other things in the plans, it looks like the chimney is shorter than the roof line, and that, so my house is the one down on the bottom right-hand corner. The chimney seems like it would need to be raised. I couldn't tell if it was a real chimney according to the plans. There also was a discrepancy in the staff report. It did say that the house was 30 foot wide, which was in keeping with the 30 to 37 foot wide other houses on the block. But according to the plans, it says 27 and 6 inches. So when we had discussions with the staff, they said, well, it's 30 feet, but it didn't seem like that according to the plan. The other concern that we have is Bernard is used a lot. As they mentioned, there's a lot of college students. There's a lot of neighbors with kids that walk up and down 18th Avenue South. And with the setback reduction and with that, the drop in the lot, I have a concern just about how we're going to navigate that street. And are we going to walk in the middle of Bernard as we're walking down? As you know, there's a whole line of commercial properties, Bongo Java, as well as other restaurants that a lot of folks park back on our street and then walk, as well as the neighbors, walk down Bernard to get to those commercial properties. Is there going to be a sidewalk there? Because right now the lot falls off fairly significantly and then kind of slopes downward. So that's a concern that I have as well, and would echo Jim's that we would really like to see that area streetscape so that it is safe to walk, and would be in favor of the setback reduction if they can make the house wider, more in line with the other houses, the other cottages that are on the street. And I think the other concern that we have discussed with Robin and Sean is the lot coverage issue. And I know that to get the amount of square footage that they're going to need to make the profit that they want, that they need to cover a certain amount of lot. But that is concerning because more and more of these properties are taking up. I mean, this has been an open lot for many, many, many years. So that is a concern of ours as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? You can just come. Yeah. And your name and address.
Yes, hi. My name is Laura Garfield, and I live at 1705 Bernard, which will be the house directly diagonal facing this project. And my main concern probably doesn't, I don't know if it concerns this committee or is the infrastructure of the neighborhood is so outdated. The alleys themselves are not maintained well. They're long overdue to have something done. The sewage drainage under the alleys and on the street has not been touched for, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years. During the Nashville flood, all the way the top of Bernard, way past Belmont, that water spills all the way down to the front of our houses because there aren't additional drainage holes around the neighborhood. So I just wanted to mention that and then reiterate my concerns about the increase in young mothers and carriages in the neighborhood since I've been there 7 years. Tremendous. And they use Bernard to gain access to Bongo and the Strip. And it's a very tiny, narrow street. So with that dip on the property that they're talking about building on, there's a kind of a dip there in the land. So that's just my only concern, really. I don't have any objections per se to the building. I'm excited that the neighborhood is up and coming, but just that the city infrastructure around the neighborhood and the restaurants is long overdue to be looked at and repaired and made safe for especially the new mothers and families in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the applicant coming back?
I don't remember if it was 12 or 14 degrees when Sean met us out there the first time, but we have been doing that for some time, and I'm not sure. I'm normally before the Planning Commission where we take care of the notices. I guess you guys do your own, so I don't think I can address the number of days of the sign or the notices. I would like to say that we requested a 30-foot wide house here. We came to talk, we discussed with staff a variance, and the reason that's in there is that's what we wanted. And they felt like that, and so we negotiated down to 27.5 with them because they felt like it was more fitting and that we didn't need to perfectly match the width of all the other bungalows that happen to be on this block. And so we started out wanting a wider house, but I believe that also is contrary to the coverage that we would like to achieve. And because we do have such a wide space between our property line and the right-of-way, we also felt that using less of that would be better. Respectfully, I believe that every tree we have is a hackberry and we have one mock orange tree. So I'm confident that we can plant something back that's nice and that's native and that works to help this neighborhood. But unfortunately, I don't believe we're going to get to save many or any of the ones we have.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else like to speak about? Okay, I'm going to close public hearing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I might, just so that I can kind of narrow the issues a little bit, hopefully for the board, there's been comments both on the applicant side as well as the opposition side with regard to notice. So I just wanted to let the board know what this notice provision is so that that is not an issue that would hinder your discussion.
Thank you.
The board actually has a rule as it relates to notice, and it is on page 6 of your rules, and it's number 3. It says applications that involve a setback reduction shall require that staff post a sign in the yard of the subject property in an easily visible location, and that the applicant shall send mail notices to the adjacent property owners at least 7 days in advance of a scheduled hearing. So it's a 7-day notice requirement, essentially.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Discussion.
My first response, and I'm not necessarily advocating this, but I was wondering if it made any sense to have the applicant meet one more time with the neighbors and maybe go back to staff and kind of button things up. And I think you're going to probably get your thing passed, but I just wish there were a couple little tweaks that could be made. Would you be that's just my...
Well, if we were going to do that, which we could obviously put that as one of the conditions and list some of the conditions that they need to meet back with staff about. If we, oh, thank you. So we could require that they work with staff on some other issues.
Well, I think Richard was more concerned about dealing with some of the neighbor concerns, and just as PR. Doing, I think that's a grand idea, but I mean that's going to be after the suggestion. I mean, to the deferment from the property owner. No.
Yeah, I don't know if he's willing to do that or not. But
is one meeting, or you were suggesting 2 weeks?
It's actually 30. It's
1 month. Yeah, month.
That's just mine.
I'm willing to consider that. I guess I'd like to hear from.
I'm always happy to meet with neighbors, which I do. I would like to hear the Planning Commission address. We've agreed, I believe, to almost all of their requests, with the exception of taking away a balcony that the staff felt like was appropriate. And I believe the orientation of the garage is our only question for you, in my belief on this request for you to approve. And I didn't hear any neighbors talk about the orientation of the garage. I believe we already agreed to get the roofing issue addressed. We agreed to lower the roof on the garage, and I believe all the other items. And I felt like all of the materials and everything were staff recommendations, or that they met the guidelines. And so I wonder what a 30-day, if I knew what I was going to discuss with them, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks. Let's see where we go with it, and then we could always include some of the other conditions that they meet back with. That way we give something a little bit more specific, but I don't want to lead discussion, just talk.
Sean, can I ask one question? When you were looking at the garage separate from the orientation issue, did you apply the guidelines for a detached accessory dwelling unit?
No. As far as I know, this was just reviewed as an accessory structure, non-living space.
I mean, I wonder if we should be doing that based on what the applicant said today. I don't have those in front of me.
You mean that it's going to be an apartment?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what they're going to do.
I don't think the applicant actually ever said that. Sean
read between the lines.
So.
I mean, he said that I thought he said he was going to run it to.
No, Sean said it. I
didn't
think.
say rented, but somebody might occupy it. Which is
the same guidelines. Yeah. I mean, is that something we can do on the fly? Do you have those with you, or maybe that's
I'm sure we
have to do it on the fly?
We can find them, but the main. Well, we've already talked about reducing the roof height. I know it's a maximum 20 feet, and there's a requirement of, I believe, 10 feet for eave height. I think that one it would probably be better if that were the approach for that to come back at another meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm sorry, Sean, that would be what?
For another meeting. The application wasn't submitted as a detached accessory dwelling, and codes would require them to get a covenant. So it's
it's totally different.
Yeah,
they'd have to than what they're got before us, right? Not totally different, but it's different what they've got before us.
Yeah, I would suggest that we table the garage issue for now, if that's the case.
Well, I'm not sure I don't think we can, because unless, I mean, they haven't. What before us is not that's what they're actually put together for approval. It's been stated here, but that's not what they put together for approval.
We could approve the house and disapprove the accessory.
We could do that, I guess. Okay. Yeah, but would we want to? Can we, based on what we've been actually presented?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm a little bit confused about, is the plans that we have here do not show a stair.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for too. Yeah, I was trying to see what stair.
So it's.
I think you have to approve what you have.
I think so too.
To be clear, sometimes during discussions, various things come out that and applications are somewhat tweaked and adjusted with minor things. But where you're talking about applying a whole new set of guidelines specifically to deal with the fact that it's an accessory structure, and that's not what you have before you today, I think you have to stick with what you have before you today. And then that will allow staff also to go back, if that is the desire of the applicant, for them to submit an application that contemplates that, and staff can go back and research it and make a determination and make an appropriate recommendation on whether or not that would be appropriate. Additionally, the code under historic zoning specifically states that the underlying base zoning is what's going to control. I'm not sure exactly what that is for that particular area, and sometimes that affects the use of the property, and any determinations related to the use are going to have to be made by codes and zoning administration. So,
by that, are you saying we need to approve this as a whole, or we can approve half? And
no, I think
all or nothing.
Yeah, break it up. Yeah, we can't break it up.
Okay.
Right. I think that's the best approach. I mean, arguably, maybe, possibly, could you break it up? Possibly. I think the best case scenario, though, is for you to approve the entire package or disapprove the entire package or approve it with conditions.
Okay. Okay. I have a question for Sean. I mean, the lot width is much more narrow. I mean, was that a subdivide of a larger lot at some point? You said that, I mean, it's been vacant since...
Yeah, I think it's similar to one of the other applications where when the neighborhood was platted, it was platted as a separate lot and then just sort of just treated as it were part of another lot for such a long time. It was essentially that's what it was, and that's why it was never built. But because it was originally platted as a lot, it is essentially grandfathered to go back to that previous lot line, whether or not it had ever been given its own address or had a house on it. So
when you say previous lot line, what? I mean, I look at
it was this lot and the one with the house next door. They were plotted as separate lots, but I believe, and I'm sort of just what I know to be true of the other one, I think is true of this one too, but it's very common for two lots to be combined by deed and then sold together and transferred down the chain of title or chain of ownership. But they were never submitted as a new plat of one lot. Okay. So they were combined by deed. They can be separated by deed without having to go through and be replatted because the two plats.
But if that existing house was built over the lot line, then what happens to the property line of this small lot? It might run through the house.
That might be a situation. I don't know. That would be something to pose. I mean,
there are two lines there, and that's what makes me ask that question.
I would have to refer that question to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
I think that the narrowness of the lot is part of the problem, that it looks like it's about 45 feet wide. The width of the houses in the neighborhood average from 30 to 37. But if you get inside that width, you're going to have some serious coverage issues. So that's why you pushed it down to 27 and a half, but then you're a little too narrow for the neighborhood. So it's a very narrow lot, creates some issues. And I think you can expect, given the way Nashville's going and this neighborhood's going, that there will be a sidewalk on Bernard Street at some point. So looking at that grass as, okay, here's some extra area, I think it's going to be pavement at some point.
Can you go back to the one that showed the existing house? Okay, thank you.
Is there any discussion about the garage having access from the alley behind, or? I think being consistent, we would want it that way. But I guess it all depends on how it would, but if it changes the drawings, that would be something that staff would have to deal with. But I think being consistent, we would want it off the alley, but be interested to any guys' comments on that.
I would agree generally, that we would want garage access from the alley where the alleys are provided. often the narrow alleys require wider openings to actually be able to turn a car into. So if we were to require them to enter the alley or enter the garage from the alley, we wouldn't require them to have individual carriage type doors on the garage, would we?
Not on an alley elevation. We would for a street-facing garage.
Mm-hmm. As shown. Yeah. And then I know I think this is out of our control, but I just want to be sure that because it was raised by one of the members of the public. Aren't we required to build sidewalks when we develop a single-family home or contribute to the sidewalk fund? One or the other.
I'm sorry, I anticipated you asking me, but yeah, that's typical. The subregs of the Planning Commission govern a lot with regard to that, and for new construction, you don't have the option of contributing to the sidewalk fund, but for existing construction and existing streets, you do. For new streets, you don't have that option, but for existing streets, you do have the option of contributing to the sidewalk fund. And usually planning and public works would work together to determine whether or not a sidewalk was required in a particular neighborhood. So that's not something that's before this board. Neither is the infrastructure, which is another piece that was brought up, is not something that is for review for this board, but ultimately would be for stormwater.
Yeah, and I think that even in older neighborhoods, I think the sidewalk issue does come into play when you're subdividing a lot, but not necessarily building on an existing lot.
Sure would be nice if we could allocate dollars to infrastructure and sidewalks, wouldn't it?
Schools and police departments.
Wow, that would be, I think we have to get elected to do that.
I don't want to do that.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make the observation that I want to go back to this notice issue. That's really concerning to me. I know that technically we have complied with the notice issue, but I heard our lawyer tell us that the provision says at least 7 days. Now, when you've got a piece of property that's been vacant for years, and suddenly we're going to put a house on it, I think that requires more notice than 7 days. You got a busy area here, and people go by it and may not see that. I just think I want to affirm what Richard started off this discussion with his observation, that maybe a little bit more time to work with the architect and the owner. With the neighbors. There seems to be a lot of issues here. There's a stairway, there's a balcony, there's trees, there's just a sidewalk, and I do think that's big. I do think having access down that street, down to these shops, is a concerning issue. So I'm concerned about whether notice was really adequate here in this case. And I would like to see an opportunity for more neighbor and architect conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we've hit a lot of the issues here. Anybody ready for a motion? Taking a stab at it. And?
I'll take a stab at it. I'll take a stab.
Mine was going to be real simple.
I move we approve the application with staff recommended conditions.
Okay, the second?
Could I add one clarification? Sorry. Just to be clear, because there's been discussion about what the garage will be used for, and it says suite on the plans, that we're specifically not approving it as a detached accessory dwelling unit, just to clarify that point.
Really there needs to be you can amend the motion even after it's been seconded. It really needs to either go forward because it's been being seconded, or it needs to fail for lack of a second. So we got to make that determination before we get into amending. We kind of jumped the gun a little bit before, but
move that we amend the motion to include a clarification that we're not approving.
We don't have a second on the floor yet.
You can second too if you want to.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
And then add move to add an amendment to the motion to clarify that the garage is not being approved as a detached accessory dwelling unit.
Good. Second.
I just have a question about, can I ask a question without a second?
Well, you've got to.
That's my move.
Yeah. Right, but you need a second on the amendment.
Right, no, I'm saying the question without a second.
I just have a question for staff. So the guidelines have specific guidelines for accessory structures and then separate specific guidelines for accessory dwellings. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The guidelines for, accessory dwelling units have more specificity when it comes to things like eave height and ridge height and exterior stairs.
Right. So we have, obviously we don't control use. If they by right can occupy a second, if their zoning allows a second unit on-site, an accessory dwelling, will they have to come back before, under this amendment, would they have to come back before us when they do? But
if this amendment goes forward, which I didn't hear a second on the amendment. Is there a second on?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. We probably should have gotten a second on the amendment, but since we're here, we'll move forward. Yes, if it's approved just as an accessory use, but not as an accessory dwelling, then yes, they would have to come back because that it specifically clarifies what the intent of this board was when it granted that.
But wouldn't it be regardless? Because they brought it to us as a detached two-car garage, so if for some reason they changed it, wouldn't it immediately kick out to something different?
I haven't looked at that before. I actually was kind of anticipating that question because it's a very good question.
I mean, because it seems like you could change everything, after it if you wanted to in that case. So it seems like you'd have to come back before.
But your question was if it was a matter of use by right.
If they can occupy this building by right as a second dwelling on site, and I don't know if they can or not, if the zoning would allow that, but then and our actions can't control use.
That's right.
Then there would be no trigger to bring it back before us. So is the amendment
except for it would
valid?
have to it would have to be it would have to have a use and occupancy approval from the zoning administrator to be occupied as an accessory dwelling. So that might kick it back. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that, and I think that there are arguments on both sides as to whether it would need to come back or whether perhaps it would not. I think you could argue either way based on what I understand.
The amendment is that it would come back before us if it were to be used as a accessory dwelling. And I guess my question is, is that something that we can control?
Yeah, is it enforceable?
Well, my understanding is if you would need the UNO to legally occupy, because if you don't, then by code it has to be attached. So they created the detached accessory dwelling unit to say, okay, fine, you could have two separate dwelling units on a lot, but there's specific conditions to the accessory unit, and most of them relate to scale and some other stuff. But what I want to make sure is we're not approving something that doesn't meet those other guidelines, because and it's implied that somehow you can go ahead and occupy it. Because I don't think it's code compliant. I don't think we have the authority to do that.
If we were to get the applicant on record to say, yes, I'm planning to do it or not, would that be helpful?
It certainly wouldn't hurt. It would. I think it would make it clear. I don't think necessarily, though, that it's any different than just amending the motion to say we want to do it for this, and this is what we're granting approval for.
And
we are not granting approval for anything else.
Okay, which is what he did. So let's get a second on his.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, second amendment. Okay, so. Do you mind, let's see, I think we got it all stated, but do you guys just mind, just since we had a lot more discussion than typical, just restate your motion, amendment, and then you don't. Nobody has to second. We've already seconded, and then we'll vote on it, just for the record.
So my motion is to approve staff recommendation and all conditions, and with the clarification that we're approving the garage as an accessory structure, not an accessory dwelling. Is that the amended motion?
And then your amendment. Okay, you got it. That's right. You got it. That's right. You got it all. Okay.
Can I ask John a couple questions? The garage height has been addressed at the neighbor's concern, raised, correct? There is natural stone, not synthetic stone. Is that correct?
A stone, just like brick samples, we would approve.
But they'd be like stone.
We've approved cast stones in the past that, they're good faux stone and bad faux stone.
Real stone. All right.
The drawings say stone.
Okay. Sidewalk is really not under our purview.
No.
Window header height, I'm assuming that's probably not that big of a deal. I mean, what you approved is basically typical of what you would approve.
Yeah, our recommendation was for approval. I think the issue was a matter of 6 inches, and they may be all right with.
And the roofing, that's been resolved?
Yep.
And the other thing I was hearing was the width, but I was sort of hearing both sides of the story, is that it's not wide enough, yet it's too close to the street, or it's going to crowd the sidewalk. So
the chimney. Staff did what they could to try to meet in the middle on that. I don't know that there's a perfect answer there.
Okay.
The chimney was in question. Was that been resolved?
Can I pose the question on to the, is it a wood-burning fireplace? Or if it's a wood-burning fireplace, it probably would have to be taller to meet code. If it's ornamental or a gas vented chimney, it might meet code at that height.
Okay, guys, let's go ahead and just vote on this. It's been out here for a while. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye. No.
Okay, one opposition. Two opposition? Okay. Okay. Motion carries with an amended motion carries.
Do we have enough there? We got 4.
Yeah.
How many? Okay.
You want to show our hands?
Yes.
Yeah.
4, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
And then 2. Okay.
And just to be clear, this was the motion as amended.
Motion
correct?
as amended. And okay, so the motion's done. I think just the commission asked, make sure that for some things we might want to look at getting more than 7 days.
Yeah, I think we should look and talk more about that, because I know from the neighborhood that I'm in,
and
people miss this stuff because they're.
No question. We got it now.
Let's do that right after we go on to the next thing here. Okay. 1406 Holly Street.
This is an application for the demolition of a non-contributing structure and the construction of a single-family residence. Staff recommends approval of the demolition of the existing house, which is the center building on the slide, as its character, form, style, materials do not fit with the historic character of the district. Demolition will result in a more historically appropriate visual effect, and so demolition meets the design guidelines. The applicant is planning to keep the existing driveway and garage, which you can see here in these 2 photos. The proposed house, new construction, is 1.5 stories, as are the majority of the buildings in the immediate vicinity. It will be approximately 31 feet high from the grade. The width of the front of the home is approximately 25 feet, and it gains in width about halfway back to approximately 30 feet. This is in keeping with the widths of the neighboring historic houses, which vary in between 25 feet and 33 feet in width. The depth of the building is almost exactly like the historic building to its left, and therefore the project meets Section 2B1 and 2B2 of the design guidelines. Here's an image of the rear facade, and here are images of the 2 side facades. And here's an image of the front facade to compare to the other houses on this this vicinity of Holly Street. The staff feels that the new construction meets the design guidelines in terms of setbacks, rhythm of spacing, materials, roof shape, orientation, proportion and rhythm of openings, location of mechanicals, and appurtenances. Again, the new house is proposed to be 31 feet tall. The historic context along Holly Street varies greatly between 17 feet and 34 feet tall from grade, with the closest homes to the site being in the range of 17 feet to 26 feet high. The majority of Lockland Springs East End is very eclectic in terms of style and massing, with homes ranging between 1 and 3 stories. There are a few areas where in Lockland Springs where all the development, there are a few areas where all the development happened at the same time, with homes very consistent in massing and style. But this area is more eclectic, and so although the properties immediately around the lot have shorter homes than what is proposed, staff did not find the condition to be an unusual for this, or the size of the house to be unusual for this area of Lockland Springs. So for instance, the 1200 block of Holly Street, on that block there is an approximately 21-foot tall house flanked by homes that are approximately 32 feet tall from grade. So along Holly Street and in Lockland Springs in general, you kind of do get a variety of heights and historic forms. And just behind the proposed project on the 1400 block of Russell Street, there's approximately 16-foot tall house next to a 25-foot tall house, which you can see here in the photo. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the demolition of the non-contributing structure and recommends approval of the new construction, finding that the project meets the design guidelines 2B for new construction and 4B for demolition. And I believe the applicant is here if you have questions, but I'm happy to answer questions before turning it over to the applicant.
The houses that you showed in terms of the height, the 1200 block, is that one in the middle? I mean, is that even a contributing structure?
You know,
I
that's
wonder
one
about its relevancy.
Right. I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to do a little bit of research. I don't know the date of construction. It does look like the form of it could be. It's one of those houses that I would have to look into, and I couldn't answer right now. But so sorry about that.
Any others for staff?
What was the square? Do you know the square footage of the house?
I don't. Perhaps the architect could answer that question.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. With the applicant, I guess we have questions anyway.
2,695 square feet.
Say that again? Sorry.
2,695.
You might as well come on up, John, just
the total square footage is about 2,700 square feet.
Any other questions? Anything you want to say?
Well, the size of the home was very, very much a focus of the entire design of the house. Given our experience on Holly Street and knowing that the sensitivity of the height of the structures there are very much predominant along that street, we started the design of this one based on going with a steeper roof and concealing the second floor entirely behind the roof itself. So in doing that, all of our fascia around our entire house is set at 11 feet. So we're basically building the first floor and setting our rafter tails right on the first floor. So that's kind of was the predominant design force of this entire design. Knowing that we were in the kind of the bottom of the ditch area, we knew that the homes on either side of us, as you go up the hill, will be taller. We kind of took that into account. We felt like the body of the house is behind the main ridge, which is about 25 to 26 feet off the front of the porch itself. So I just wanted to say that it was very much a primary focus of the design to bring the scale of the home down to the sidewalk and down to the street.
Thanks, Nate. Any other questions? Okay. Any open public hearing? Anyone like to speak on behalf of the project? Okay. Close public hearing. Discussion. Motion.
I guess maybe it's a question for John. I mean, I think it's a little on the taller side, and that stretch of Holly is particularly short, I guess, in that range, the 17 to 26 range that staff notes in their report. So this would be 5 feet taller than anything in that stretch. And when we're looking at the two in the 1200 block, and that's up a hill and a significant distance. I think when you look at what's immediately around it, acknowledging that there's some eclectic nature to the neighborhood, I think it's still quite a bit taller than the tallest in the immediate area. So is there any opportunity to lower it a couple feet? Because I think you may have done that up the street on the corner. It was, I think, decided that it would be lowered a foot or two. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to do something similar like that here.
I think the staff added 3 feet on the dimension that I gave for foundation and porch, but we try to get those under 2 feet if at all possible. So we actually lowered it to 28 feet. That's the revision cloud on the drawing submitted. So we think the ridge will be 30 feet, but that ridge is not the main. When you look at the front of the house, the main ridge line is actually about 1.5 to 2 foot shorter than the main ridge line beyond that point. So
from this recommendation, you've already brought it down a foot from there.
We have. We've kind of pushed and pulled as much as we can, and our strategy was, again, kind of stair-stepping the mass of the house as you work backwards into the lot, given the porch, and then the main ridge structure, and then the main really tall ridge structure, which is further back, set about 25 to 26 feet off the porch. If there are, we would have to lower the slope of the roof. We talked to staff about that, but that would ultimately change the entire design concept of the house and the look of the house. The other one would be to reduce the ceiling height downstairs, but my client's unwilling to do that, just given the market demand. The only thing I could say is we're going to really try to get the finished floor elevation down as close to the sidewalk as we can without obviously putting in adverse drainage, because we know we're at the bottom of the hill there.
I appreciate being sensitive to it. The language in the guidelines is not contrasting greatly, and I live in this neighborhood, and the number one complaint I hear from people, it's too tall, it's too tall, it's too tall. Hear that repeatedly, but acknowledging, like staff does, I think there's a point to be made that it's eclectic, and you do have these contrasting houses next door to each other that were built about the same time. So I think we try to find the middle ground. I guess if 30 from grade is about as low as you can bring it.
Okay.
I wanted to, I guess, respond to that, but I can't believe this is a 2,700 square foot house. I mean, it looks like a cottage to me. It looks, the scale of it is, it's amazing how much square footage, and we shouldn't care how many square feet are in it. It's about the scale and how it fits into the neighborhood. And I get concerned, that there's a general sort of sense that less is better, in the community, And if that were the case, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of homes that were built in the early 20th century and late 19th century that we would perhaps turn down. And so, there throughout our neighborhood in East Nashville, there are incredible homes that are, of varying scale throughout the neighborhood, and it's very diverse and it mixes up. And then there's some places where there's some patterns, specifically. But I don't know. I don't know that. Sorry, this is more commentary than anything. But I'm just concerned that over and over and over we're kind of thinking about this as how small can we get it, And I worry to some degree. Most of our homes over there had have 11-foot ceilings. And so most of the homes that are being built today don't have 11-foot ceilings. So we're sort of squashing the proportions in some instances of the ground levels, perhaps even more so than what they were originally built at as 100 years ago. So
I don't think most have 11-foot ceilings. I would say the vast majority do not. I mean, there are examples of it. I think urban renewal destroyed 80% of them. What's left, there are those grand homes, but I think the sentiment that I was expressing that I hear repeatedly, and I do agree with you, I think a lot of times it's overdone and it's just wanting things to stay small for the sake of it, and I agree. But I do think there's something to it as it relates to rhythm and not contrasting greatly when there is a pattern. And I think in this particular stretch of Holly, as you go up that hill, there is a nice pattern to the way it steps up. So to insert something into that that's remarkably taller, and I'm not sure that this is the case here, I don't think that it is, but if it was 35 feet tall, I'd feel very differently about it. But if you went up to 12th Street, just up the block, you could build something 35 feet tall, look great, because that's where the grand homes still are. Yeah. But I agree with you. We shouldn't be dropping it just for the sake of dropping it. My request here was more in terms of trying to maintain a rhythm as it relates to the ridges as you look up and down that hill, because it is unusual that from each side, from the top of the hill and from the bottom up, you can see a much further distance than you typically can in other parts of the neighborhood because of the particularly deep slope.
Well, let's see if we can get a motion here.
I move approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Staff, is there any other business before? Okay. Did you guys want? Yeah. Did you guys want to talk about notice?
Could we have staff to address that at the next meeting, maybe?
Yeah.
To maybe
could you
think through?
That's great.
Let us know the history, a little bit about the history in terms of our notice procedures.
That'd be awesome. So you put that as maybe as a business.
We'll find out what other boards do and.
Yeah, and it might be a case by case thing, but maybe there's some way to nail it down.
Did it used to be? I mean, some of the commissions, it's up to the homeowners to send. It used to be up to the homeowners to send out those notices, and now we've brought it back in so that we have got control.
Well, we post the signs, but the applicants put up the notices. We obviously just don't have administrative costs for since we don't take in fees. We don't have.
The applicant sends the letter.
Yep.
Does it relate to? I mean, I know you all. Tim's trying to get another staff member, and how notice relates to. Does that push forward? Does it push forward when you have to have your recommendations done and things like that? Does it affect you that way? That it just makes life harder?
It's just another thing that has to be done. There are usually maybe 3 or 4 setback reductions a month. That's not necessarily a.
I suppose you can always give notice, and if someone pulls it, they pull it. But at least there was notice, and that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so adjourned.